Welcome back to Ladies of Another View on BEK. We are being joined by Jeff Morgan. He is with Dad Talk Today with Eric Carroll. Now, Eric was going to be here, but he's taking his kids to the beach today, so Jeff happened to step in for him, and we are very grateful for that. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on here. And yes, Eric needed the vacation. He's been so busy. He's been through, I think, 40 states already this year, not just broadcasting, but trying to make changes in our laws to help families.
Wonderful. Well, I met him down in Rapid City at the Freedom Fest just this
Right.
past week and had a nice conversation with him. But why don't you tell our viewers what Freedom Fest is, or excuse me, what Dad Talk Today is all about?
Sure. Dad Talk Today was actually started by Eric about 2 years ago. He went through a divorce situation, and then, as often happens with divorce, sometimes one of the parents gets kicked out of the child's life and it becomes alienated. And that's what Eric was struggling with, was trying to say, how do we deal with this issue? So he decided to start a podcast about it, not knowing that when he started the podcast, it was going to have many, many people watching it. He's got over 250,000 people right now that are actually follow him on this. But I met Eric last year at CPAC. We were there together, sitting beside each other. I heard of him, he heard of me, but that was about it. Turned out that he was at CPAC and he interviewed on Media Row, and they heard his story. So the people at CPAC asked him if he wanted to take a media booth, which was really quite a blessing, pretty amazing as well. I was there with cameras. I take my cameras everywhere if I can. And I said, I'll be there to help you out. And it turned out that the original primary means of broadcasting failed. So I became primary. And several months afterwards, he asked if I would co-host with him. But primarily, we talk a lot about the issues of, it's called Dad Talk Today. We talk about a lot of things from a father's perspective, but it's not really a father's perspective. We're looking at things from family integrity. Really, it's the family that needs to be strengthened. And when the family's broken, our children are broken. When the family is broken, our society is broken. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. We're trying to change laws so that rather than when somebody files for divorce, divorce is going to be an automatic given. There is no defense. It's already a predetermined outcome. But there are many situations where families could be mended and brought together. And too often, the attorneys will tell you, don't try to do that because maybe it's a trick. Or maybe the states will have laws in effect that as soon as somebody wants a divorce, it's basically, again, a predetermined outcome. And it creates a lot of issues for both the parents involved, for the families, extended families, for friends, for children. And I would even argue that it goes on that the effects even are transgenerational, so the grandchildren are affected. And when somebody says, well, I want a divorce for whatever reason, they need to know that when they're taking this action, you are going to affect your children and your grandchildren. Too often our society tells us that children are resilient, and children will be happy if their parents are happy. And yet more and more and more, we're seeing that to be false. One of my friends wrote a book called The Primal Loss, and now adult children of divorce speak out. It talks about what happened when their parents got divorced. Sometimes they look like they're okay outwardly, but inside it can tear them up. I remember one person wrote that the day that my parents got divorced was the day I quit believing in God, because I could not believe that God would let something so evil happen to my family. So these are very emotional issues, and they're issues that in many instances, there's a lot of preventable divorces, unnecessary divorces. And I was just reading something today where one father, a Catholic father, basically said that 22% of the people that go through divorce have divorce regret, kind of wish they wouldn't have done so. So I think that we need to look at some of these issues, like how can we work things out, have a society that seeks to heal rather than destroy.
You talk about working things out, but on the front end of marriage, there's not a lot of reality that goes into that. It's all about the dress and all the things.
Right.
But there's not a lot of prep where it's like marriage isn't what TV's telling you it is.
Right.
I think that piece too really needs to be addressed before all the kids come along and before, and then once you get into that, like you were saying about it's a big business. What was, $55 billion industry is divorce. And
Right.
It's like, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. There really should be more of an idea that people should take marriage not in the Hollywood sense of marriage. Because if you look at Hollywood, what happens? In 2 hours, you've got people that meet each other, they go out on their first date, they're married, and that's the end of it. That's somehow this is the pinnacle of everything, but marriage is work, hard work, and people don't like to see that. So the first time a conflict comes up, they think, well, maybe we're out of love, maybe things aren't working right. But marriage is it's essential to our society, and it's not always easy. And that's just the reality of it. So yes, there needs to be more ideas, more of an approach on helping people understand what marriage is all about. And also, I know I've gone to a church that they have the pre-engagement classes, and occasionally they say that they see people that break off their engagement or their possible wedding plans. And to be honest with you, that's probably better that they do it now than 5 years from now when there are children involved. So that is something that really does need to be looked at. Marriage is difficult work. And I've said that one of the things that the church should be doing is the church should be taking couples that are there and helping new couples walk through the first year or two. Because let's face it, when you get married, you're now waking up with somebody who you've maybe never woken up with in your entire life. And things are different. No matter how romanticized you want to make it, it can be difficult. And you need people that have traveled the road that can give you hints and advice to establish good habits. If you establish bad habits from the beginning, they become bad habits that get just enmeshed in your lives, and it often leads to bad consequences.
Well, it sounds like this is a lot of information about divorce and how to avoid it. But it's called dad talk. So the dads are
Right.
the ones that are obviously being in a detrimental situation here. And how are you addressing that?
So the dad talk, you're right, that often happens. And I'm not deprecating any type of a woman that goes through this, because sometimes women are victims as well. The mothers are victims. But often what happens in the situation of divorce, a father gets kicked out of a child's life. A father gets to almost becomes a visitor to the child's life. And the courts say, well, you're not going to be having the children all the time. So what you need to do is pay up. You need to become a wallet. Child support is what your obligation is. But a child needs more than money. A child needs a relationship. The child needs to have his identity or her identity formed by both parents, because the child is made from both parents. But the other thing the child needs to know is that both parents act together, because if that's the basis of our society. No man is an island, no woman is an island. We interact with each other, and home should be the place where you learn the values of marriage, the ideas about learning how to cooperate with one another, how to forgive each other, how to love one another, how to put somebody else's needs above yourself. Whether it be your spouse or your children, you are not the center of your universe, and selfishness will kill a marriage. So, but as far as dads are concerned, yes, oftentimes the dads are the ones that are victimized by this. It's interesting because the way that laws are right now almost incentivizes women at times, many times, to get the divorce. They get the child support, the children, they get cash and prizes, what some people call it. And I've talked with so many men that have said, I didn't even know my wife was unhappy, and then I got kicked out. And you might be kicked out with a police force or who knows what. So that's why the dad talk today is to support fathers.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to learning more in the next couple of segments, but we got to take a quick break right now, and we'll come back with more of Jeff right here on Ladies of Another View on BEK. Welcome back to Ladies of Another View on BEK. We are visiting with Jeff Morgan out of Texas, and he is with Dad Talk today with Eric Carroll. Eric is the one that introduced or came up with this podcast. And so anyway, Jeff has decided to go ahead and step in for Eric today because he's taking his kids to the beach. So welcome back to the show again, Jeff. So,
Thank you very much.
Before we ended last segment, we were talking about the various issues with marriage, etc. But
Right.
Some information that you had shared with me was about no-fault divorce in Texas. Explain that to me.
So no fault divorce, I always say that no fault divorce is kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. No fault divorce
Where have you
sounds
heard
so
that?
nice, doesn't it? We just have no fault. We want to get on with our lives. But in many instances, what no fault really is, it's forced divorce. It's unilateral divorce. All one person has to do is allege insupportability. And nobody can even tell you what insupportability means. And it becomes a predetermined outcome that a divorce will be granted. The judges will tell you, well, we can't do anything about it. Well, you're a judge, you're supposed to be able to, but they don't even, they just basically become, when you go into a family court and there was a possibility of a marriage being reconciled, it basically becomes an execution chamber. You think about Jack of Work, and he had sick patients and he put them to death. There's a big difference between a sick marriage that needs help in healing and restoration and a dead marriage. But too oftentimes, every judge looks at this like it's a dead marriage. And the other reality is that the attorneys often will help to embitter people against each other. And if the marriage did have any chance of reconciliation prior to the divorce hearing, the attorneys often make sure that it doesn't afterwards. You hear attorneys say, well, don't believe him, don't believe her, because if you do this, maybe it's a trick. Maybe they're trying to pull something on you. But we really should have much more of an emphasis on healing of marriages, not just because of the people involved, but because it affects the children and it affects society. Marriage is a public good. When you have strong families, strong marriages, you have benefits of the community. Where you have a community of single moms, for example, or children without fathers, that has an impact on the community. There's higher crime rates, there's higher health issues, there's more people dropping out of school, there's gangs, more gang-related activities. Every single social pathology or malady that you look at is increased, and not just by a mere percentage, often by factors due to the issue of divorce. So that's what's going on here. No fault divorce. Ronald Reagan said it was the biggest regret that he had from public office was signing no fault divorce. It sounded good, right? It sounded good, it's going to be an amicable divorce, but it has caused more division, more problems, more heartache, more financial plundering by attorneys than almost anything that I'm aware of.
So what is the divorce rate in America nowadays? I mean, when I was growing up, I had I graduated with the class of about 42, and there was just one family that was a divorced family. But nowadays, it seems like everybody comes from a divorced family or a mixed family. What is the divorce rate?
So the divorce rate, that's a very interesting question, because there are the ways people calculate the divorce rate, and they're not necessarily accurate. Some people will give you 50% or 55 or 40%. I mean, the reality is that the divorce rate has been falling. But the other reality is that's because a lot of families have not been formed. There's a lot of people that live together, they cohabit, and they don't get married. So if you included those into the divorce rate, in a sense, people that have lived together for a couple of years and then they've decided, we don't want to do this. There's a lot of ways you could look at this, that the numbers could be changed. But they do say that, one thing that does take place, though, is that divorce happens less frequently among college educated people. So this is another thing, that with the divorce rate the divorces that take place, it already impacts people that have strikes against them in their life, people that don't have the education, don't have the wealth, perhaps, don't have the stability, that did not know that growing up. So divorce perpetuates itself, and it really is a blight. It's something that actually harms many, many people. When you look at the divorce rates, it used to be in the 1960s, the Black family was very, very strong. And then LBJ came up with the Great Society program. And basically what he said is that we'll give you money, mothers, if you kick the father out of the house, government will become your daddy. And it's interesting because in the Soviet Union, they realized that no government agency could actually take the place of a parent. But LBJ tried to put this program forth that, we'll pay you so long as you get the father out of the house. And people made money that way. But the devastation that has taken place in the Black community is horrendous. And it's not just the Black community. This is not a racism issue from my perspective. It's hitting everybody right now. But I think that, we need to look back at what history once was, when families were strong. When families were strong, our society was better outcomes for our children, better outcomes for our grandchildren.
And there are families that I know of that the mom and dad are living, they're above poverty level, but they're not living much above it. and they find out that if they divorce, they are able to qualify for a lot more programs and have a
Right.
lot more income to take better care of their children. And
Right.
so they'll go through a divorce, and then that causes, even though they say they're still in love and they, it causes division. I mean, it just does by design. And
It does.
that's one of the things with the federal government and that have encouraged, I think, families to break apart is
Right.
economics.
There are two things that are involved. You can incentivize and reward good behavior, and you can disincentivize bad behavior, or you can just do the opposite. And what's happening with these programs, they are actually incentivizing bad behavior, and they're disincentivizing good behavior. So as you mentioned, I mean, there are people that they want to do things the right way. They're married, but they're struggling. And yet, if they get divorced, there's more money coming in. So that is what? It's an incentive for family fragmentation. Family fragmentation is not good. And what if you look at any type of a socialist regime or communist regime, what do they attack first? They attack the church and they attack the family. And this is exactly what Vladimir Lenin did back when he came to power in Bolshevik Russia. And the way that he attacked these two institutions, though, was again through the marriage and divorce code. What he said is that marriage is a civil union, whereas prior to that, it was the church that had jurisdiction over marriage. So he took marriage to the state, and then he also created the idea of no-fault divorce. No-fault divorce for any reason, for no reason, you can make up a reason. That's what we have today in American society. But the thing that I found interesting is that in 1926, about 8 years after Lenin came to power, there was an article in the Atlantic magazine that talked about the Russian effort to abolish marriage. And they were talking about the devastation that had taken place in the society. I mean, they had orphans, they had abortions were overwhelming their villages. There were just numerous things that were taking place, so much so that it was causing debate among the communists. What do we do about this thing? And eventually the communists had to realize that, we have this divorce culture, right? Because we think that, hey, we have all these people to devote themselves fully to the party so they can divorce their wife, divorce their husband. It created a disaster. They had no raw material to work with the children. I remember talking with Trevor Loudon at CPAC, and he said, what may happen, Jeff, is that it may get so bad that you may see states start to actually strengthen marriages, because what happens is with all this family fragmentation, you have children that don't know who they are. You don't have the raw materials to work with. But we need to be incentivizing marriage. Right now, from my perspective, there is no legal protection for marriage. When you get married, you think you're entering into a lifelong marriage contract. You think that the state will defend that contract. What actually happens, though, when one person says, I want a divorce for any reason, for no reason, they can make up a reason. The state will side with the petitioner. The petitioner will always win. By that, I mean the petitioner will always get the divorce. And the state often incentivizes the person. If you get a divorce, as you were saying, you get money. The government will help you. You may get some type of housing. You may get a free attorney to help you out. And then, you have all of these benefits that come. Why do I need a father? Why do I need a husband? But the children need both parents. You cannot self-generate a child. It takes two people to make a child. It takes two people to rear a child, and children need both parents.
Well, amen to that. And thank goodness you're going to stick around for another segment, because we simply just ran out of time on this one. But we have so many more questions to ask, but we'll be right back after this on Ladies of Another View on BEK. Welcome back to Ladies of Another View on BEK. We're visiting with Jeff Morgan from Dad Talk Today with Eric Carroll. And so that's a website that everybody needs to check out and learn a little bit more about the rights for dads. And we're trying to get a quick Cliff Note version right here from Jeff. But Jeff, during the break, we talked a little bit about abortion and how that's detrimental to fathers as well. So why don't you tell our viewers what we talked about?
This is so hard when you hear men that have gone through this stuff, because right now the way the abortion industry works, there's only one person who gets the choice, and that is the mother of the child. What about the father? What about the grandparents who want to see grandchildren? What about the uncles or the aunts or the brothers and the sisters who have lost either a nephew or a niece or a sibling? And what I've said is that the idea of unilateral abortion is just the outflow of unilateral divorce. Right now, any person can claim divorce for any reason, for no reason. The government will always back that person up. Unilateral divorce is the same thing. And I've talked with just recently, I've started bringing up this issue. And I've talked with men that have told me about how heartbroken they were and that they've lost a child. And I've talked with women who've gone through abortions, who've been healed, and they say, now I have to confront the father of the child who's still grieving 10, 15 years later about a child that he or she never had. The progression that took place in America was first no-fault divorce and then Roe versus Wade. The same thing happened in Bolshevik Russia. First, it was no-fault divorce, and then it was the people saying abortion now covers our villages with shame. And the reason being is because when you have a family, you have a support group. You have a father and a mother who are there. And usually, sometimes you've heard of other stories too, but when a child gets pregnant, well, first off, if there's divorce, it's more likely the child will be involved in promiscuous sex and will get pregnant. And then because of the lack of the support system nearby, will end up seeking an abortion. 73% of the people that get abortion would have kept their children had they had the financial wherewithal to do so. So the abortion issue, it's a huge, huge issue. And of course, we have to address it. But my fear was is that we have not looked at the root cause. The root cause for a lot of this stuff comes down to the unilateral no-fault divorce, forced divorce, compulsory divorce. And now if I'm a mother, for example, and if I want to get back at my husband or whatever, I can kill his baby. We don't call it killing the baby, we call it having an abortion. And we whitewash things that we should never, ever be whitewashing. But I've talked with people, some very famous people that have talked to me about this issue. And it's you can still see the pain in their hearts over this. But this has been coming up more and more recently.
Well, I'm seeing a theme happen here. LBJ says, the government will be your daddy. They're trying to say that marriage and civil union are the same thing when one is a contract and the other is a sanctified thing in a church between the people and their God. And now we're seeing that, even retired people are getting divorced because of tax issues. And now you're looking at abortion being a thing that is all about the money as well. How do we stop the flow of the money?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. They're incentivizing bad behavior.
Exactly.
What I look at is this. My approach may be a little bit longer term, but we have to go back to the root issue. To me, the idea that one person can choose, after two people enter a marriage together by mutual consent, why does one person get to dissolve the marriage? By unilateral consent. And with no-fault divorce, there's often a lot of lying. It's not no fault. Everybody knows that. But one person may be out having an affair. The other person may be doing something to his wife or whatever, and they file for no-fault divorce. Well, in some instances, perhaps the husband should be in jail as a criminal if he's beating his wife. And the wife should be saying, well, wait a minute, you've been out sleeping with 4 or 5 men. This is not no fault. You've actually destroyed your marriage here. So, but to me, the issues about when we create victims, we think that somehow we have to solve it with money. But I think what we need to do is start to take an approach that we say, how do we stop minimizing the creation of victims? And when you have children that are going through divorce, the likelihood is that they also, as victims of divorce, will be victimizers or will live that out in their lives later on. The money part, it makes us feel good sometimes, I guess. I don't know. But the other thing is, if you go look at it from a different perspective, if you look at voting patterns, and this is a very important issue, because where you have more single parents, more never formed families, they tend to vote more Democrat, and what I would say at this point, more socialist or communist. Why is that? Because they've been taught that government is the daddy. Government is the one who comes in with the solutions. If that's why the number one issue, the number one area of attack is always the family. If you have a strong family, you have less reliance on the government, and you're not looking for a handout. You're looking to say, we are here together and we will work through this together. I've been through many different countries. I was a missionary in the Middle East. And what was interesting over there is that we had Iraqi refugees come in to Jordan. And, Saddam Hussein used to attack the men. And then after he attacked the men, he would attack the children, because after he got the men out of the house, he figured, okay, the boys are going to grow up and be men and they're going to come and kill me. So if you were a mother and you saw that your husband was gone, you left the country to save your children. But I will tell you, in my opinion, what's happening in these family courts is every bit as cruel and tyrannical, dictatorial, bloody, evil is what took place in Iraq under Saddam Hussein, in what they're doing to destroy families. And these family court attorneys and other people like that, they say, well, we really can't do anything. You certainly can, but they don't want to. And the part of the reason, you talk about the money, divorce is a very, very, very lucrative industry. And that's why they don't want to do it, many of these people. In fact, in Texas, at the Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee, where we were talking about the divorce issue, we had two people that were family law attorneys and one person who owned a law firm who dealt with family law. Three people that if they vote a certain way, it's going to benefit their private lives as divorce attorneys. They don't necessarily want to solve a problem, because by solving the problem, they're going to undermine their own income. And then you also had, and I followed the money out. If you look at the Texas Trial Lawyers Association and their lobbyist, Steve Bresnan, who was also the lobbyist for the Texas Family Law Foundation, they paid people money to get them into power. They spent a lot of money working on putting these people into place on this one commission, this one committee. We think, well, it's just the Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee. It is the most important committee, if not the most important, one of the most important committees, in my opinion, to the state, because everything flows downhill from family. If the family is broken, the community will be broken, the state is broken, there is the taxpayers have to pay more money for this stuff. It is a disaster, but we're almost afraid to talk about the issue of the family. Oh, that's just a social issue. It is not just a social issue. It is a criminal issue. It's a crime issue. It's an education issue. Every single thing that you look at flows downstream from the family. So yes, disincentivize, you want to get money out of it, make sure, number one, because our Texas Constitution says these attorneys should not even have been allowed to vote on any of these bills, because they were using their public office for private gain. And if not, you could have made the case that that's exactly what they were doing. So I think it's corrupt, and that's why we're so strong against this stuff. We have to be outraged, and the church especially. The church should be saying, as you mentioned, two people come together in union under God. We actually had a case here in 2001. This Justice Kim Thompson Frost said that no-fault divorce was unconstitutional because it violated Article 1, Section 6 of the freedom to worship. No human authority ought in any case whatsoever to control or interfere with the rights of conscience in the matter of religion. If you believe that marriage is a sacrament, if you believe that you're getting married because of obedience to God, the state cannot interfere with that. And in Texas, we actually have more protections for religious liberty and religious duties than we do at a national level. And yet we just completely disregard that whole issue. So you're right. I mean, marriage is a contract, but it's also a religious sacrament. Why is the state involved in a sacrament of the church?
They shouldn't be. They always say the first one to the attorneys wins.
That is correct.
In a divorce.
Well, and we didn't have a chance to touch on it because I know we're going to run out of time, but where does human services organizations fit into all of this? Because there's a money trail there as well. And I just think that that's another piece in all of this that ties in.
Yeah, I think we'll give you another minute here, if you can answer that in a minute for us.
So when you say the human services, can you elaborate just a little bit more to make sure that I'm answering your question?
Well, there's the department at the federal level, what is it, Health and Human Services, and then it goes down to the state level.
Are you talking about like the Title 4D money?
Well, that in part, yeah. But then all these family services that they wrap around families and everything, and
Social services.
counseling services that perhaps don't value marriage as much as, well, what makes you happy? Well, if you're,
Right.
if he's not making you happy, then here's something out here. Here's a carrot.
Right. So it's interesting because one of the main influences on keeping a marriage together is the counselor's attitude toward marriage. Is divorce an option or not an option? If the counselor says, you're staying married, we're going to help you work through it, the possibility of success is much higher than if you have a counselor who says divorce is always an option. And the interesting thing is with no-fault divorce, it was supposed to originally be to decrease divorce, to give families an opportunity to work things out, not to create divorce on demand such as we have today.
Okay, well, we do appreciate your time, Jeff. We simply ran out for today, but maybe you can join us again sometime. But we got to take a quick break. Thanks for joining us. And
I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We'll be right back after this on Ladies of Another View on BEK. Welcome back to Ladies of Another View on BEK. Patty flew in for the last segment.
Welcome back to Patty. I get to join in again.
Hey, man, he was a great guest, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Lots of
Great information.
good
He
information.
points out some things that we all need to know.
Right. And I know we can't possibly get everything covered in one show. And so, but it gives you guys a little bit of feed to go ahead and do a little more research or just log on to his website, excuse me, and then, just learn.
That's a blog you can follow.
Absolutely.
And that daddy talk, I was on YouTube this morning looking at some of the things. There's a lot of very good interviews on there to give, some of the background, more of the background of what's happening in our society as far as family and how it all doesn't work.
Well, so many of the programs that we thought on the surface, it seems like it was helping us. I was listening to a morning radio talk show, and they talked about in the Black community that, 1960s, I think 20-something percent had a father and a mother in their household. But the government came in and said that they would give support to women and their children, but there had to not be a man in the household.
Right.
And since then, it's 70-something percent of Black households do not have a father in the household.
And 55% of Planned Parenthood clinics are in Black neighborhoods. Go figure.
Coincidence?
Imagine that.
Right.
Yeah.